Hello everyone, welcome to our webinar today. Today we'll be discussing how to develop scanning skills in the clients that we are working with, particularly clients that are using switch scanning to access their assistive technology. My name is Michelle Lange. I'm an occupational therapist in the Denver, Colorado area. I work in a variety of assistive technologies, primarily positioning the client and then helping them to access their assistive technology, whatever that may be. And I work quite a bit in the area of augmentative communication, which is where a lot of these scanning skills are really needed. So with that said, let's jump on in. So today we'll be talking about developing scanning skills. The skills that are required for someone to scan through their options on a variety of assistive technology are not very intuitive, and often an individual client will have much better outcomes if they have a chance to actually practice and develop these skills before it's transferred over to that technology. Some of the strategies that we use to develop scanning skills can provide some immediate control for a client and then also prepare them to use more sophisticated technologies in the future. Now, I want this to be helpful for you and helpful for the clients that you work with. After all, everyone's real busy, and if you are taking the time for this course here today, I want it to be something that will really help you out. So think about a client that you're working with, and as we move through this information, think of some of the strategies that might be helpful for that individual. Jot down some notes, try it out with them, let me know how it works. It would be great. Also, as we're moving along, feel free to type any questions or comments into the question box, and I will answer those as we go along. We'll also have some time for questions at the end. If I don't answer your question right away, don't worry. It might be just that I'm waiting a few minutes or that information is coming up. So before developing switch skills, we first need to identify what switch are we going to use and where are we going to put it. That is another whole topic, and it's very much dependent upon the overall positioning of the client. If the client is well positioned, then they're going to be able to use their body optimally, and that's going to allow them to use their technology optimally as well. If you're interested, if you haven't heard that information before, if you look under the archived ABLEnet webinars on their site, you can find some information there on switch assessment where we've covered this in the past, looking just at these items, how to determine the optimal switch type and optimal switch placement. Now, as you're working with a client, you might find that sometimes their switch skills seem to be stalling out a bit. Occasionally, this is because we really haven't yet pinpointed the best switch site and or switch type. And so we might have to go back to the drawing board a little bit, and that's okay. So during an initial evaluation, I might have a sense of where I want to put a switch, maybe a sense of the type of switch, but until we start using it in context, sometimes it's hard to know if that's truly going to be successful. So we might have to back up, relook at that. Also keep in mind that if the client seems to be plateauing, it might be that they're bored. So we might have to change up the task, what we're having them control with this switch to maintain that interest level. Again, we may need to look at a different switch placement or type. And for some children, it might be that truly they have plateaued at this point, they've reached their potential. But remember, particularly in children, that this can change. So it's important that we follow up. This child might hang out on a plateau for a while and then truly be ready to move forward again. That was a real quick little section there, but if you have any questions already, again, feel free to type those into that chat box. So scanning skills. The specific types of scanning skills that are required to use a device are going to depend on the type of scanning that we use. There are different scanning strategies that are available. It's going to be dependent on the technology that we're using, whether it's, say, a speech-generating device or a power wheelchair, and the specific device. So if we're looking at speech-generating devices, the scanning options between each of those devices can vary as well. Our most common scanning strategies include automatic scanning, step scanning, and inverse scan, though inverse scan is not as common as it used to be. So if we have decided that of all the various access methods there are for, let's say, a communication device, direct, eye gaze, mouse, that we've decided on switch scanning, we now have more decisions to make than just that we've chosen to use a switch. What type of switch, where we're putting it, we now have to decide how is this person going to scan through all of this information. The display in this picture here has a tremendous amount of vocabulary on it. How it's organized is very, very important, and the strategies that we provide to help the client move through this information also very important. So in automatic scanning, we use a single switch. We can use two switches with some of our strategies as well. The first time the client hits the switch, it begins the scan. The second activation selects from there. So depending on how we've set up the device, we might select a quadrant, a quarter of the screen, or other block, a row, a column, or an individual selection. So we have a lot of different scanning strategies. We can scan automatically in a linear fashion, row column, column row, or quadrant. Regardless, multiple switch activations are required to get through the vocabulary so someone can make a selection. Each person we work with is an individual and may respond better to one of these strategies than another. A child might start with something simple like a linear scan and then move on to other strategies as their selections increase. So let's take a look at this. On the top here, you can see we have a linear scan example. Right now there's a highlight around the letter A. As we move through, it's going to move left to right typically, and that is our linear scan. Let me go back one here. So we're going to go A, B, C, D, E, F, and then it will drop down to the next row and continue that linear scan. So we hit the switch once. It will continue to move along until we hit the switch a second time to select whatever is highlighted. When we don't have a lot of choices, sometimes with younger children, linear scan might make more sense to them. In row column scanning, the first time we hit the switch, an entire row is highlighted. Each time we hit the switch, this moves through each of the row options that we have. Once we select a row, then we have an individual column that is selected, left to right. So we move linearly through the columns after we've made that selection. And once we get to our desired selection, we hit the switch a final time. So one switch hit to start scanning each row, a second switch hit to begin scanning the columns within the selected row, and a final third switch hit to select an individual location. When someone is using this automatic scan, there are certain skills that are required. The client needs to anticipate that their desired selection is coming up and then wait for it. And that's really difficult for a lot of our clients. It can really kick up some level of anxiety. It can lead to an increase in muscle tone. And sometimes that can impact whether or not the client is then able to successfully activate their switch. They might miss their desired selection in their excitement. Once the desired selection is highlighted, the client needs to activate their switch to make that selection. So that means that their switch needs to be timed and it needs to be accurate. Otherwise, I miss out and perhaps my scan has to start all over again. Now that's common enough in augmentative communication, but it's frustrating, and we want to avoid that as much as we can. Training scanning skills can help with some of that. Finally, the client needs to let go of the switch. In most of these setups, the way these devices work, if the client doesn't let go of the switch right away, it's okay. Typically, the selection is programmed to activate or be selected, speak, on the actual switch activation rather than on switch release. Compared to two-switch scanning, which we'll talk about in a minute, auto scan requires less total switch activation, because instead of using that second switch to keep moving the highlight along, to move through our selections, this is done automatically. This can be important for some of our clients, because some of our clients, in order to hit that switch, the amount of times required to get through their vocabulary, this can quickly lead to fatigue. It can even lead to an increase in muscle tone, and either fatigue or increased tone can reduce motor control. For clients who use auditory scanning, I'm listening to my choices. Perhaps I can't see the display very well, or I need a cognitive aid. As I'm listening to those choices, sometimes I have found in my experience that automatic scanning works easier with auditory scanning as opposed to two-switch. With two-switch, every time I move through my selections, it can play an auditory cue. It can be a little less intuitive for my clients. With automatic scanning, we can increase scan speed as the client continues to gain skills. We want to usually start on the slower side, not so slow that the client loses interest or gets overly frustrated. So that's automatic scanning using one switch. But some of our clients are going to use step scanning, and this requires two switches. The first switch moves through the possible solutions, and the second switch selects the highlighted choice. So let me get my little pointer here. Let's say this is our first switch. Each time I hit this, my highlight is going to move through my choices. Once I get to the highlighted choice that I would like to select, I hit my select switch, second switch, and that is chosen and or spoken. So I have two different switches. These switches can be any switch placed anywhere the client has good control. With step scanning, there are more switch activations that are required. That requires a lot of repetitive movement and endurance on the part of the client. Some clients are going to be able to do this, particularly with practice and time. Others may have difficulty with this task. The client still has some degree of waiting that's required. It's not time to hit the second switch until I've moved through my desired vocabulary and I'm highlighting my desired selection. Then I hit the second switch to select it. So there is still waiting required, but there's not the same degree of anticipation, and that can be very helpful for some of our clients to get rid of that anticipation that increases that anxiety and tone and makes me more likely to miss my target. The client still needs to activate the switch and release the switch, and with automated scanning, release is not a time-dependent activity. So when is step scanning indicated? Well, again, this works well for clients who struggle with anticipation. That anticipation leads to that anxiety, that excitement, the increased tone, and then the client often misses their desired selection that they work so hard to get to, and then they have to wait for the scan to come around again. Two-switch puts that control firmly with the client. They can choose to move through with their moving switch, that first switch, at their own pace as they wish to. But it can be more difficult to use with people who use auditory scanning. And again, there are a lot more switch hits that are required. So what devices use scanning? Well, certainly speech-generating devices, AAC, uses scanning. So if I'm not using direct eye gaze or mouse control, then I'm going to be using a switch, and that's going to require some type of scanning strategy. Computers do offer scanning. There may be a scanning onboard, on-screen keyboard, other scanning strategies to move the mouse different areas, like cross scanner. There can be scanning available on tablets, on certain applications, particularly a lot of communication apps, and some electronic aids to daily living that are on the market that can be controlled by switch do offer scanning. Excuse me. I'm glad I can't spread my germs to you via the internet. So let's talk about some strategies for developing these scanning skills in the clients that we are working with. We can use basic EADLs, electronic aids to daily living. These have been around for a long time, but still can be quite engaging for some of our clients, and I use these frequently to develop scanning skills. We can also take advantage of some computer software programs and some cool apps that are available to us on mobile devices. See if I can move my slide here. There we go. So let's talk about some of the basic EADLs that we can use to develop these scanning strategies. We can use through a switch latch and timer or a power link, and we'll talk about each of those here in just a moment. Timed mode. In timed mode, a switch is plugged into the basic EADL, a switch latch and timer, a power link, and then the controlled device, either a battery-operated toy or a simple electronic device, can be operated by that switch. By using timed mode, where the device stays on for a pre-programmed amount of time, let's say 10 seconds, we can develop specific skills needed for single switch scanning, primarily anticipation, waiting, and timing. So the client activates the switch, the device stays on for a pre-programmed amount of time, and turns off. The client begins to anticipate it's almost time for this device to turn off. I need to hit the switch again. I need to wait for that. I need to time that appropriate switch activation. This is a fun way and a pretty low risk for the client way, high success way, to build these scanning skills. So this is a switch latch and timer. This is the Jelly Beamer from ABDA, and it has a switch latch and timer built into it. So let me grab my pointer again. There we go. This is our switch. This type of switch usually would be activated by someone's hand. If this isn't the best switch for them, there's a little switch jack on the side. We can plug in any mechanical switch we want. This wireless receiver plugs into the device that we want to activate. Let's say it's a switch toy. In timed mode, again, for example, we could set this to, say, 10 seconds. I don't like to set a really long time because I'm kind of impatient and I'm trying to get in a bunch of switch hits before the end of the session with a client. Each time the client activates the switch, the battery-operated toy turns on, stays on for about that 10-second window, and the client has to come back and hit the switch again. Again, we're starting to develop anticipation, waiting, and accuracy with the switch hit, even if the client has no idea that's what we're doing. And hey, that's what therapy is all about. The power link does the same thing, but for simple electronical devices. And the nice thing about that is we don't need to worry about batteries. We also have perhaps a wider variety of devices we can plug in there to keep up a client's interest. Electrical devices might be of more interest to an older child as well. So we connect this to any simple electrical device. such as a fan, a lighted mirror, a wave machine. We put it in timed mode, again, maybe 10 seconds. We can do anywhere from 0 to 60 seconds or 0 to 60 minutes. And after that time has elapsed, the client needs to recognize it's the appropriate time to hit the switch. Again, working on that anticipation, the time's coming up. Waiting, it's not time to hit the switch yet. And now, finally, I'm going to hit the switch to get this device to reactivate. So here's an example. Toby loves trains. I love trains. Trains are fun. Lots of kids love trains. We can connect a toy train to a power link. Trains have this transformer portion that plugs into the wall typically. This can plug into the power link instead. You connect a switch to the power link, turn the transformer on to the speed that you want. When the client activates the switch, the train begins to move. Toby begins to anticipate the train's going to stop. I have to wait for the train to stop. And then I'm going to activate my switch again to make it go because I'm so motivated by this activity. I really want that train to move, and so I'm going to be interested, motivated to hit the switch again. So again, developing and managing that anxiety, waiting, and developing timing and accuracy in activating the switch. So this all helps prepare someone to use scanning in the future. We're working on these concepts. We're working on the motor skills. It's also motivating and can achieve other goals like independent control of a toy or other activity. I'm going to give people a second to type in any questions or comments they might have before we talk about some other strategies we can use to develop these scanning skills. I know we always have a large group here with lots and lots of questions, and it takes some time to type those out. If I miss your question by chance, we will pick it up at the next time that I have an opportunity to, or our next question break. All right, I'm not seeing any questions right now, so I'm going to go ahead and keep going. If you are typing, keep typing. Oh, there we go. Colleen has asked, I missed the beginning due to technical challenges. What does EADL stand for? Electronic Aids to Daily Living. And switch latch and timers and power links are part of a category of technology called basic EADLs that control that simple type of technology. All right. So we've talked about using some of those basic EADLs to start developing scanning skills. Next, we're going to turn to some options using computer software that can also be used specifically to target these skills in a motivating way. So there are some single switch software programs that are designed specifically to train scanning skills, particularly single switch scanning skills. We don't have as many options for two switch scanning training programs. So what's required to make this work? Well, generally we need some type of switch interface that attaches to the computer. We then need the switch that's most appropriate for that individual client at their best placement. And finally, we need the software to work on these scanning skills. There is a fairly large amount of cause and effect software that's out there. This can be used to build switch skills because the client is motivated, enticed to keep reaching out, activating that switch, and something fantastic happens on the computer screen. That helps to just build up that motor skill, that repetition, so that the client gets used to hitting that switch multiple times without undue fatigue. It also starts developing something called automaticity. You know, when we're driving our car down the road and a ball goes crossing the street, we slam on our brake. We're not thinking about where the brake is. We're not thinking about anything else. We're just thinking there might be a child chasing that ball, right? So we have to make sure that we are on that brake so we don't cause an accident. The reason you can hit that brake so fast is automaticity. You've hit it thousands and thousands and thousands of times, as opposed to a new driver who might still panic and hit the gas instead of the brake. That's why teens need lots and lots of practice with a permit long before they go on to real driving. Our clients, when they're using a switch, need to develop automaticity where they're thinking about what their selection is, what their target is, not where the switch is. There are other software programs outside and beyond cause and effect that then work on anticipation, weighting, and timing and accuracy. So let's take a look at some of the options out there. Inclusive TLC has a number of options. On their website, if you go under their category of switch accessible software, you'll see some subcategories: timing software, scanning software, one switch, and two switch. All of this software can be used to help build switch skills. So in their timing category, one of the software programs that I like is called Switch Skills 1. It helps work on timing, reaction time, and provides kind of an introduction to switch scanning. So we're not actually scanning through options using a program like this, but we are starting to build timing. This is the appropriate time to hit my switch, and I need to do so in a relatively appropriate window of time. So I'm working on that reaction time as well. There's a variety of activities because with children, hey, with adults too, it's very important to keep that motivation going. So we want to provide a variety of activities so we know that the client is still engaged. Another option or number of options under timing are Super Switch Hitter, which is pictured here on the right and involves baseball for our sports fans. Switch Lanes, which is bowling. Switch Jam, which involves music, and Easy Games, which presents a bunch of different arcade games. Each of these are primarily working on timing. So as the ball is thrown by the pitcher, and don't worry, it's not too fast, we have time to activate our switch and hit the ball. Same with bowling and these other games. So primary goal is timing. Under timing, they also have a category called Switch Skills Scanning. And this program here includes 22 different activities in 5 different sections, and it increases the levels of skill and complexity in baby steps. Now, not all of our clients are going to need a task broken down to this extent. Some clients may pick up on this task of scanning pretty readily. Other clients, in order to be successful, need more time. We might need to break things down into those baby steps, and these activities allow you to do so. So we slowly up the ante. It becomes a little more complex, gives the client time to build that mastery, and then eventually we can transfer that over to actual use with an assistive technology device. And then they also have a category just simply called scanning. This category can be used to continue to develop scanning skills, but it adds in other layers too. And some of those layers get rather academic, and so may not be as appropriate for developing scanning skills, because now instead of breaking down a task, we've added in some other layers where the client has to scan and focus on other factors, again, like math. So important to build up skills well before you move on to this step. Inclusive TLC also has software available in categories called one switch and two switch. And these are programs that can be operated obviously by one or two switches. Sometimes there's other layers present too. So as opposed to a straightforward training program, these are actually other activities like this one where I get to choose what someone's going to cook. It's great for reinforcement and variety, but I don't typically start with these programs. I start with the others that are more of a pure training program without these other layers. Other nice options include single switch software from MarbleSoft. So if you go to the MarbleSoft website, they have a category called desktop software, under which they have a subcategory called switch training. This includes a number of programs that can be used to develop scanning skills as well as other switch skills. Frog and Fly has been around, gosh, forever. I've used this program on and off for many, many years. The graphics, fortunately, have improved over the years, but this can be used at various levels, and that makes this software a little more versatile for a number of clients that you may be working with. So you can use this in a cause and effect way where every time you hit the switch, something cool happens, which generally means the frog is going to eat something and there's lots of ooey gooey side effects. In auto scan, my choices are scanned, so I can choose what is the frog going to eat. So here he has 3 different choices of bugs he can eat. Or it might be that a bug is moving across the screen and the frog needs to get that bug at the appropriate time. That can be used to work on auto scanning. There's also a mode where we can specifically work on 2-switch scanning. Hook up 2 different switches to that switch interface. One switch is going to move through my choices. The second switch is going to make the selection. MarbleSoft has another software program called Scan and Match. This can be used to work on auto scan as well as step scanning. So I have a variety of different options here of games. That variety, I can't state this enough, it's super, super important to keep our clients engaged. So I can choose whether we're going to be playing with puppies or flowers or candy or other activities here. And then I can slowly, through settings, move the client up through levels of complexity. Switch Wars is another Bill Lynn game that's been around for a really long time. I have a lot of clients I work with who are big Star Wars fans. This is not a Star Wars game, but it's kind of close, and many kids really enjoy this. So you can use Switch Wars in various modes to work on that auto scan. You can work specifically on linear scan, step scanning, where we have the 2-switch, and specifically reaction time. This also has just a cause and effect mode. So in cause and effect, I hit the switch. Every time I hit the switch, something amazing happens on the screen that has to do with spaceships and aliens and outer space, and cool music plays, and there's quite a variety to that feedback. As I get up into the program, I can scan through specific options of space, and let's say, for example, the spaceship is only in one position on the screen. A circle like this one here will move around. I have to wait until the circle is around the spaceship and then push my switch to destroy him. It's a rather violent game, but somehow it's okay when it's in outer space. Okay, MarbleSoft also has a program under their 2-switch software category called Learning 2-Switch Step Scanning, and that's exactly what you do. There's 21 different activities. Again, really awesome for clients because we can choose from a variety of activities, something that maybe really is exciting for an individual client, move through levels of complexity to develop these skills for future use with more complex assistive technology. So those are some of the software options that are available out there that allow us to control games just for recreation, for participation, to play with a friend, but more specifically to develop switch skills, particularly scanning skills, so the client is more successful with their other technology. So let's take a break again, talk about any questions or comments that you might have. Allison, great question. Allison has asked, any suggestions for training software that doesn't require vision skills to practice timing when giving auditory skills? Great question. I work with lots and lots of kids who do not have strong vision. There might be cortical visual impairment. We're actually going to be talking about that in next month's webinar, or other visual issues. So if the client really can't see that screen, that can make working on scanning very difficult with both these apps and software. And even though there's usually quite a bit of auditory chatter going on, there's a lot of different noises and sound effects and verbal reinforcement, I'm not aware of any of these that really work well on auditory scanning. So what I do for those clients that really can't see these programs well is I instead use those basic EADLs, the switch latch and timers, the power links, to work on those skills because my client can hear the result. So if I connect a battery operated device or electrical device that is primarily auditory or even has other sensory feedback like a fan or vibration, then the client can still practice those skills. The other thing I will do oftentimes with those kiddos who do not have a lot of vision is I'll do partner-assisted scanning. And that's where, I'm sure many of you are familiar with this, I would simply give the client several choices of activities, and I would do so verbally so they can hear that. So for example, if my client really likes, I don't know, let's say they like spinning around in their wheelchair, or they like it when mom comes and kisses them on the cheek, I might give them those two choices. When they hear the choice that they want, they hit the switch. And so we're in essence scanning through multiple choices auditorily of what they want to do, even if that switch isn't connected to anything at all. And that can be a very effective way of starting to work on some of these skills without having the visual requirements. All right, Elizabeth has asked, what app-based scanning programs do you use? Funny you should ask, because we're going to go into that in just a second. So hang on, Elizabeth, because that's our very next section here. And Sandy has said, oh, thank you. I think the next section might get into this, but is a tablet or a computer better to start two-switch scanning? It's not really whether one is better than the other. It's which you prefer, what equipment that you have. In general, some of the software programs tend to cost more than some of the apps, and that can make the apps nice and desirable. And families often have a tablet at home and may be able to also more readily work on scanning training at home to reinforce what's going on at school, where the family may be less likely to have a computer or be able to purchase the software programs for the computer. And Cheryl's asked, are there any free apps for scanning or free computer programs? You know, some of these programs have a trial period where you could try it out, see if you like it, see if it works with a client. But from there, you need to purchase them, and you can see the prices on these websites of what they charge. Hopefully, if you're in a school setting, it's something the school would consider purchasing. I know sometimes it's easy to think, no way. They always say they don't have any money. I think a lot of times we need to take the extra step to explain why this is so important, because it's easy for the person in charge of the purse strings to think, yeah, sure, I'd love to download a bunch of apps to my tablet too and play around. It's important to understand that something that looks like we're just playing around and blowing up spaceships on an app is really preparing someone to use their communication device. That's quite a leap, and we need to explain why those two tasks are connected. So let's jump into those apps. There are some apps available that are specifically designed to work on switch skills. In our very last presentation, our last webinar in October, we talked about developing general switch skills. So you can always go back and pick up that webinar if you're interested in that topic. But looking specifically at developing scanning skills using an app, there's some advantages to doing so. We can now take advantage of many apps that can be controlled by a single switch and can be used to work on the same skills as single switch software. As we know, when tablets first came out, we really didn't have as wide a variety of apps available to us, let alone apps that were accessible and worked on such a specific skill. An advantage of using a tablet versus a computer is that, again, a lot of families have a tablet at home and maybe they don't have a computer. Apps are usually less expensive than the single switch software programs out there, not always, but many of these apps are pretty inexpensive. Now, we do need a way of accessing the tablet depending on the tablet platform and version of the operating system. Some of these things do change, as we know, so we may need some type of adapter or Bluetooth switch to allow for this to occur. So what are some of our options? Well, Inclusive TLC on their website has a category called iPad. You can look from there under apps. Now, even though it's under the category iPad, most of these apps are actually available for the iPad iOS platform, but also Android platforms. So don't be misled by iPad. If the family or yourself has a different type of tablet, you can still use some of these apps. So here is one of their apps. It's called Splat the Clowns. Slapstick, throw the old pie in the face has been around, gosh, forever and ever, and it's still apparently very popular with little children, with some adults as well. So we can use this in more of a cause and effect mode where you hit the switch, pie goes flying. That's lots of fun. And we can work on some timing and reaction time. But there is a mode where the client has to wait for the clown to reach a certain target and then hit the switch. That begins to work on those scanning concepts because I have to anticipate and wait for the correct time to activate the switch. And if I miss that time, nothing horrible happens, but the pie doesn't go splat, and I can try again. Most of these games are really good at keeping it super positive because we need to keep engaging the child. Another app that Inclusive TLC has that works on scanning is called Hurdle Champion. It helps to develop switch and timing skills, and it works on both iOS and Android platforms as well. So there are certain times where it's appropriate to hit the switch, and then cool things happen. In this case, runners jumping over hurdles. Another option from Inclusive TLC is Jungle Adventure, which is pictured here on the right, and Little Lost Penguin, which is pictured on the left. These are fun little apps. I find that kids really like these quite a bit. The graphics are very friendly. It works on timing and anticipation. You have to watch and wait for the correct time to overcome obstacles. So for example, on the left here, this penguin is trying to jump from the ocean onto the iceberg. If the penguin jumps too soon or too late, well, the penguin doesn't end up on top of the ice. Same with Jungle Adventure. There's certain times where the switch needs to be hit. The client has to anticipate and time their switch activation. It may seem like, hey, what in the world does this have to do with communication, for example? But these really are the exact skills that we need to work on so that a client can be more successful in using scanning with other assistive technology. Now, with my OT hat on, one of the things I like about a lot of these apps, and these two are included in that, is the graphics on a lot of these are good at having decent contrast and not being too busy. So if our client can see these visually, even clients that have some visual issues can often use these well, because these are designed for kids that could have some visual challenges. Racing Cars is another really fun app for a lot of little kids. Lots of little kids go through quite the cars stage. This works on 1 or 2 switch scanning, which is a nice option, and really is designed specifically to develop scanning skills. So here I can scan through to choose the car that I want to race, or choose the 2 cars that I want to race. I can start the race. I can do a lot of fun things, all with this app. And as I mentioned before, boy, the graphics on this picture aren't real good. Sorry about that. Lots of kids love trains. This works with trains. It's called Train Tracker, and it allows the child to use 1 or 2 switches to work on each of those switch scanning skills to both build a track and run the train. So you can scan through options of pieces of track that you want, build the track that you would like, and then try to run the train. Now, if you don't put your track together quite right and there's a dead end, well, the train won't go past that spot. So it works on those problem-solving skills as well. Another app from Inclusive TLC is Treasure Island. This one also can be used to work on 1 or 2 switch scanning. It works on scanning in a grid, and if I remember right, it has a linear scan. I'm not sure if you can change that. So you have to wait for the scan to get your desired selection and hit your switch if you're using 1 switch, or with 2 switches you move through with your first switch, select with your second. Some of these games, you can get a sense, are more complex than others. That allows you to choose what best matches your students' interests and capabilities. This particular program, this app, is called Shh, and it's used to develop 2 switch skills. Each switch controls a different feature. So basically, someone's trying desperately to sleep, and the switch keeps creating havoc and waking someone up. And many, many children find this to be quite hilarious. Judy Lin software has some nice options as well. They have an app for iPad called Step Scanning, and it's comprised of 8 different lessons to move someone through from very simple switch interactions to more complex ones, and building that competence specifically for clients who use 2 switches. There's another company called Life Tool Solutions. Now, I haven't used this app myself, but I found some information about it. They have a program called Switch Trainer, and it's designed to train either 1 or 2 switches, and it includes those scanning skills. So I haven't tried this one myself. If any of you have, please let me know. As we know, there's always lots of new apps out there that keep showing up. I don't know what our current list of apps are that are available to us, but I think last I heard it was somewhere in the million range. It's crazy. So always new stuff out there. Always worthwhile to check out some of these major sources to see if they have any new apps available or if they've updated them, and then see if there's some new sources for apps as well. And then finally, MarbleSoft. MarbleSoft, if you go to their website and look under iPad products and apps, Their apps are no longer there. I'm not sure why. They used to be. So what you need to do is go to the iTunes store. These, I believe, only work on iPad right now. And if you look up MarbleSoft in the iTunes store, you'll see a number of different apps. These apps primarily work on cause and effect. So you can use these as a part of your training strategy, but the apps do not specifically work on training scanning skills. All right, I want to open them up. I can't talk today. We're going to open up the questions again, see if anyone has any questions or comments at this point. Bree has asked, what strategy do you find best to reduce over-activations when verbal and visual prompts are not working? You know, that's a tricky one. There was a program I used to use years ago, and I don't think it's still available because I didn't list it in this presentation, but R.J. Cooper had a variety of software out there for some switch training, and it's called Switch Progressions, Teen Progressions, I believe. One of the games that he had worked on just this issue of clients that keep hitting the switch. And if the client hit the switch at the wrong time, a big stop sign would show up in the middle of the screen and say, stop. And then encourage the client to, again, hit the switch at the right time. That's the only program that I've seen that really directly addresses additional switch hits. Other programs typically ignore switch hits when nothing is happening at that moment. So let's say I hit the switch and I'm waiting for something to happen, and I just keep hitting the switch. Depending on the program, nothing happens until the right time, or it might be that I just make an unintended selection, and sometimes that can be enough. So sometimes I address that verbally and directly with the client. I'll cue them to hit the switch and then encourage them not to hit the switch in between. I might make up a fun little game like, don't hit your switch until I say this funny word, like peanut butter or something. And I will literally say some words about every 5 seconds and make them wait until they hear peanut butter. And if they hit the switch when they hear a different word, we kind of laugh about it, say, hey, that's okay, let's try again. Remember, wait for peanut butter. And we just try to make it a fun game. And that can help some kids to learn to settle down while they're waiting for their choices. I hope that helps. It's a tough, tough problem. Allison has asked, how do you determine the appropriate time? I need you to finish your question there, Allison. I don't see all of it here. I think you're probably saying to progress to a communication device. I think what I do is it of course depends on the individual client and how well they're doing. If I think that the communication device is a little much for them yet, we'll spend some time on the scanning practice. Some kids will go ahead and start them on a communication device with just several selections while we're also working on building their scanning skills. So it depends on the individual. Susanna has asked, have you tried to make your own switch games using a software such as Smart Boxes Grid 3? That's a great idea. You know, it comes down to how creative you are, and if you have the resources and knowledge to do that, certainly you can come up with some fun games on your own. I'm pretty good at tiling my kitchen floor. I'm not so good at trying to invent software games myself. But more power to you, go for it. And I think this is where we'll see some more apps keep showing up, and that app store is where people try these things out. Heidi has asked, can we share your PowerPoint with our colleagues? You're certainly welcome to share the handout, which is a PDF of the PowerPoint. That would be fine. And tell your colleagues if they really, really like it, they should send me a candy bar. Just not right now. I'm still eating too much Halloween candy myself. Jacqueline has asked, what communication applications have your clients used for two-switch scanning? Jacqueline, I'm not 100% sure of what you're asking. If you mean the actual vocabulary and I can't think of the right word right now. The boy, I'm really blanking on the word. I need to get this. But each communication device has its own strategy. It has its own communication layouts, like MinSpeak and different icons, but other language programs. If you're talking about those language programs, you can use any of those with two-switch scanning as long as the device itself supports two-switch scanning. I hope that answers your question. If I'm off base, if you could retype that, that would be great. Catherine has asked if this is the R.J. Cooper app you mentioned, and I see you've listed an app in the chat box to the iTunes store with teen switch progressions. It might be. I can't remember right now, and I apologize for that, but I would check that out to see if it includes that stop. I haven't used that for a very, very long time, but like I said, it's the only one I can remember that actually built that in to specifically work on those overactivations. Oh, and Allison, thank you for giving me a little more information. Allison has said, sorry, my question was cut off. How do you determine when it is appropriate to advance to two switches from one switch training? That's a great question. It brings up something tricky in this whole world of switches. There are lots of folks out there who would say everybody should use two-switch scanning. There's some folks who would say everyone should use one-switch scanning, and there's a bunch of us in the middle. I got to tell you my own bias, I use one-switch scanning far more than I use two-switch scanning. But that's me, and that is the clients that I work with. The reason is that many of my clients, most of my clients have significant visual deficits and seem to do a little better with auditory scanning using one switch than they do with two. The second reason is that it's hard enough to find that one switch site and get the client using it well. Using two switch sites throughout the day becomes more than my clients can often manage. So I would say that making the decision to stay with one switch versus two is going to depend partly on vision and a good part on does your client have the motor capacity to hit a switch hundreds of times a day. And Elizabeth has mentioned fewer switches, fewer things to set up and lose. Good point too. All right, we have another question before we get to that, and I will get to that. I want to make sure we quickly get to our take-home message here. For some of our clients, step-by-step training is required to achieve a successful outcome, and that means I can use my scanning successfully. This requires that the client is well-positioned, because when they're well-positioned, we can find the very best switch location and type. We can train basic switch skills, which we discussed in our last webinar in October, and again, you can access that if you would like to. But some of our clients really benefit from specific training to work on their switch scanning skills for application on any assistive technology requiring scanning. I know we focus somewhat on communication today because that's a very common application, but the same would go for other scanning applications as well. Now I mentioned earlier, think of a client you're working with and jot down some ideas of some of these strategies would work for that client. So go ahead, make sure you write those down, give it a try. Feel free to email me, let me know if it works. Always good just to try these things out. And what I would encourage you to do as well is get on those app stores, purchase an inexpensive switch scanning training app, and just try it out. Try it out yourself. Try it out with a client. It's a great way to start. I want to thank you very much for participating in our webinar today. And I'm going to put my contact information up here while I answer a few more questions. Jacqueline has said, yes, I mean what type of language-based software such as Snap, Plus, Core, First, Unity, ProQ, etc. I have trouble finding appropriate communication applications to use scanning with due to the organization of the vocabulary. Well, Jacqueline, I'm an occupational therapist, so I'm not as familiar with all these language strategies as I could be. It doesn't make as much sense to my brain, and I work very closely with speech-language pathologists who do. But I know that the organization of the vocabulary is quite critical, and that the speech-language pathologists that I work with, and one of them is on this webinar here today, will organize that vocabulary quite differently for someone who's using switch scanning than using other access methods. And just maybe a bug in AbleNet's ear, that would be, I think, a really helpful webinar, is how do we organize vocabulary differently based on the access method? Because if someone's using eye gaze versus switch versus direct, oftentimes we organize that vocabulary quite differently. I am not the best person to speak to that, but I totally agree with the issue there. Hey, Sarah, I do hope to see you soon. I got that message. Thank you. And thank you to Elizabeth and everyone else. Very appreciate that. And Laura has mentioned that the Judy Lynn software is only $8. So that's a nice option. Again, a lot of these apps just aren't as expensive as some of the software programs, which is great. And boy, it sure is engaging. All you have to do is pull out a tablet and they're very, very excited. All right, I want to thank you very much for attending the webinar here today on behalf of myself and AbleNet. We're at the top of the hour, so if you need to get off of this webinar and get back to work, feel free to do so. Feel free to join us next month. I'm doing a webinar about cortical visual impairment and how that impacts access to various assistive technology devices. For those of you who still have questions, I will stay on for a few more minutes and make sure we have answered those as well. Again, for those of you who need to leave, thank you very much for attending. Have a great